Weapons are a recurring genus of enemy, and some of the most feared and dangerous creatures in Final Fantasy. The most famous and recurring weapons are Ultima Weapon and Omega Weapon. Ultima Weapon is often a weaker version of Omega Weapon in games where they appear together, but in later games Ultima Weapon returned to being a standalone enemy. There are sometimes 4 additional recurring weapons that originate from Final Fantasy VII: Sapphire, Ruby, Emerald, and Diamond. Ultima Weapon and Omega Weapon do not have an apparent design basis, though they usually resemble each other, and at their core resemble the recurring enemy Behemoth. The appearances of the Sapphire, Ruby, Emerald, and Diamond weapons seem to come from the Gundam franchise. The 4 all greatly resemble mecha seen in various Gundam media. However, it has not been officially confirmed if they were based on Gundam mecha, so this may just be a coincidence. Besides, giant robots are practically a genre in Japanese pop culture. Similarities in designs, deliberate or subconscious, are inevitable. Omega Weapon should not be confused with the recurring enemy Omega. While it is plausible that Omega Weapon was named after Omega, there has never been a direct connection between them, aside from characters using Omega as shorthand for Omega Weapon. Omega Weapon has a very different appearance and behavior from Omega, and in later games, Omega Weapon has been phased out of the franchise and Omega established as the more recurring creature. Ultima Weapon's name is derived from Ultima, a term in the series that originates in Final Fantasy II as the ultimate magic, and has evolved into a recurring spell that is also used as a prefix for other powerful objects or attacks, such as the recurring sword, Ultima Weapon. Ultima means the last in Latin, and is the root word of ultimate. This gives a symbolic resonance between Ultima Weapon and Omega Weapon, with Omega being the final letter of the Greek alphabet and used to symbolize the idea of an end or limit. The weapons usually appear as biomechanical creatures, though they are sometimes more clearly mechanical. Ultima Weapon has 2 recurring designs, from Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII. The 6th design is a 6-legged beast with a long tail, blue horns, and golden mechanical components along its back. The 7th design is a centaur-like creature with 4 legs, a humanoid torso with arms and claws, and a pair of wings. When Omega Weapon appears, its design is similar to the Ultima Weapon, and sometimes a palette swap. The designs of the other weapons have been consistent through their occasional appearances. Sapphire Weapon is an aquatic creature with a long tail, and spike-like fins emerging all over its body. Ruby Weapon has a roughly humanoid design, but with deformed proportions, and its arms can be extended into long tentacles. Emerald Weapon has a central body with jaw-like protrusions, 2 leg-like protrusions below, and 2 massive shoulders that contain its primary armaments, 4 colored orbs that can fire lasers. Diamond Weapon has a humanoid form with legs, a torso, arms, and a head, and its primary armaments are blasters concealed in its shoulders. The 4 are color-coded blue, red, green, and white, and they share a design element of a large red power core on their upper bodies. Ultima Weapon and Omega Weapon do not have any particular recurring attacks or behaviors, but they are universally able to use some of the strongest abilities in the game. They focus particularly in powerful magic and non-elemental spells, and attacks that can broadly be defined as pure energy, including Flare, Flare Star, Ultima, Ultima Beam, and Shimmering Rain. The colored weapons often have various beam and blast type attacks that use their name as a prefix, such as Emerald Shot or Ruby Ray, but this is not universal to all their attacks. Weapons are extremely powerful, always among the most dangerous enemies in any game. They are often optional bosses and usually can be considered super bosses, intended to be extremely challenging even to high-level players. There is no consistent reward for defeating them, but it is often something powerful and valuable, like a character's strongest weapon. The original appearance of Ultima Weapon is in Final Fantasy VI, where it was called Atma Weapon in the Super NES release. The only information on it comes from an NPC in Albrook, who mentions that there were 2 Ultima Weapons created 1,000 years ago during the War of the Magi, a sword and a monster. The Ultima Weapon attacks the party on the floating continent and is by far the most powerful boss encountered up to this point, with a large amount of HP and a vast array of attacks, and it is the first encounter to use the Fierce Battle as its boss theme to emphasize the higher threat it poses. As its most dangerous attack, it can grant itself Protect, Shell, and Haste, and then charge energy for several turns to use Flare Star. A palette swap of Ultima Weapon, the Ultima Buster, Atma in the Super NES version, appears at the end of the game in Kefka's Tower. Unlike the original Ultima weapon, there was no story context given to Ultima Buster, but it states it was created long ago and forgotten, possibly meaning it also existed during the War of the Magi. It too can cast a variety of powerful magic, including the Ultima spell after charging for several turns. Versions of the game with Dragon's Den include Omega Weapon as an optional boss found in Dragon's Den after the player clears the Soul Shrine. Omega Weapon is a palette swap of Ultima Weapon intended to resemble the Final Fantasy VIII Omega Weapon. Its attack patterns change as its HP decreases, and includes Kefka's special attacks Forsaken and Vengeance, and Omega Drive, a powerful physical attack. Omega Weapon is the final challenge in the game and gives no rewards for defeating it, but the mobile and Steam versions award an achievement. Ultima Weapon appears in versions of Final Fantasy II that include the Dawn of Souls side quest. It is a palette swap of the Behemoth based on the Final Fantasy VI Ultima Weapon, though it is purely biological with yellow hair in place of mechanical components. Minwu, Scott, Yosef, and Rickard find a recreation of the top floor of the Mysidian Tower, and when they approach the central orb containing the power of Ultima, Ultima Weapon challenges Minwu to prove he is worthy of holding the ultimate magic. Ultima Weapon can use Blaze, Flare, and Earthquake, and when defeated bestows the Ultima Tome on the party. This is a rare occasion the Ultima Weapon can be considered a benign, even benevolent creature. Ultima Weapon appears in Final Fantasy IV The After Years in the depths of the True Moon. It is one of 4 Final Fantasy VI bosses to appear, along with Death Gaze, Ultros, and the Phantom Train. Ultima Weapon is much stronger than the others though, with power levels elevating it to a super boss on par with Omega and Shinru, who also appear in the game. Ultima Weapon's attacks are based on its attack patterns in Final Fantasy VI, with most specific moves retained or given equivalents. It can also grant itself Shell, Protect, and Haste, but in place of Flare Star, it casts Meteor. When defeated, it drops the Ultima Weapon, the most powerful sword in the game that is only usable by Cecil, Theodore, Kain, and Golbez. Final Fantasy VII makes the weapons a major plot point. 2,000 years ago, the planet spawned the weapons to combat Jenova, but the Cetra were able to defeat Jenova without the weapons. Since Jenova still existed and may return someday, the weapons remained and went into slumber, waiting for the day they may be needed. That day came during the events of the game, when Sephiroth used the Black Materia to summon Meteor. The weapons awoke, but Sephiroth's energy barrier prevented them from sensing his presence. Thus, they attacked the greatest threat to the planet that they could detect, the main power bases of the Shinra Electric Power Company. The first weapon, Sapphire Weapon, attacked Junon and caused massive destruction, but was defeated when the Mako Cannon obliterated its head. Later, Ultimate Weapon, a mistranslation of Ultima Weapon, attacked Mideel, where Cloud was recovering from Mako poisoning, and the party fended it off. Shinra moved the Mako Cannon from Junon to Midgar, renaming it the Sister Ray and intending to use it to destroy the energy barrier shielding Sephiroth in the northern crater. Diamond Weapon emerged from the ocean and marched on Midgar, and the party engaged it to stall it, but Diamond Weapon continued on. Shinra fired the Sister Ray as Diamond Weapon unleashed a barrage of energy from its shoulders. The Sister Ray's beam pierced Diamond Weapon's core, destroying it, and shattered Sephiroth's barrier, while Diamond Weapon's attack destroyed the top floors of Shinra's headquarters, seemingly killing Rufus Shinra until the expanded universe revealed he survived. On the third disc of the game, the player can find Ultimate Weapon flying around the world and engage it aboard the airship. When it is defeated, it crashes near Cosmo Canyon, creating a crater that allows the ancient force to be accessed. When Ultimate Weapon is defeated, Ruby Weapon can be found in the desert around the Gold Saucer. Emerald Weapon is encountered underwater and can be fought at any point the player can access the submarine. Ultimate Weapon and Diamond Weapon are simply powerful bosses, but Ruby Weapon and Emerald Weapon are super bosses with specific gimmicks. Ruby Weapon is immune to all damage until its tentacles are exposed, and it only does this when there is a single party member alive in the party. If there is more than one and its tentacles are withdrawn, it will use Whirl Sand to remove a party member from battle until there is only one. The player can exploit this, however, by entering battle with 2 party members KO'd, prompting Ruby Weapon to expose its tentacles, and then revive the party. As long as the tentacles are not KO'd, Ruby weapon will remain vulnerable. Emerald weapon has 4 eyes set into its shoulders that use laser attacks to damage a character's HP or MP. Emerald weapon's most infamous attack is Air Tam Storm, materia spelled backwards. This attack deals a fixed amount of damage, 1111 times the amount of materia a character has equipped. Additionally, unless the party equips the underwater materia, they have only 20 minutes to defeat Emerald weapon or they automatically lose. The Emerald weapon drops the Earth Harp when defeated, and Ruby weapon drops the Desert Rose. These items can be traded to an NPC in Calm for a set of Master Magic, Master Command, and Master Summon materia for the Earth Harp, and a gold chocobo for the Desert Rose. Ultimate weapon, meanwhile, drops Cloud's strongest sword, the Ultima weapon. In the original Japanese version of the game, only Ultimate weapon, Sapphire weapon, and Diamond weapon existed. Diamond weapon was also not fought in the original Japanese version, leaving Ultimate weapon as the only weapon the party could face. The North American and European releases of the game added Ruby weapon and Emerald weapon, and made Diamond weapon a boss as well. These releases also changed the FMV of the high wind leaving the northern crater to show the weapons emerging and flying away, giving players a glimpse of the 4 they would eventually fight. The international re-release of Final Fantasy VII in Japan added in the new content from the overseas versions, including the new boss fights and the altered FMV. This also means that only Sapphire weapon was not named in-game, since it remained unfought, but it was named in concept art. The compilation of Final Fantasy VII introduces 2 new weapons. The prequel Before Crisis features Jade weapon as an optional boss after completing the game. Jade weapon awakened to combat Zirconiade, the ultimate summon that could destroy the world. However, since the Turks destroyed Zirconiade, Jade weapon shifted its attention to them. Jade weapon appeared depending on the player's real-world location in Japan, and attacked the Turks using trapezoidal constructs it created. Dirge of Cerberus reveals the final weapon, Omega. While the other weapons are meant to protect the planet, Omega is a failsafe. If the planet is in danger, Omega will gather the life stream and depart to the cosmos to settle on another planet, leaving the old to wither and die. Vincent's Chaos form is Omega's Harbinger, designated to eradicate life to return them to the life stream for Omega. Deep Ground is engaging in the mass slaughter of civilians in an attempt to trick Omega into awakening ahead of its time. It is revealed this plan was masterminded by Hojo, who had uploaded his mind into the worldwide network and possessed Weiss, intending to use him as a physical body to merge with Omega. Hojo was purged from Weiss, but Omega still manifests using Weiss's body. Vincent, using the power of Chaos, enters Omega and engages Weiss in a harness born from Omega. Weiss is killed and Omega is destroyed, preventing the planet's death. Crisis Core has a cameo from Emerald weapon in the Benora Underground, where its distinct shoulders and eyes can be seen emerging from a growth of crystal in the background of the cavern's main area. According to the Crisis Core Complete Guide, Benora was being excavated by Shinra for the construction of a Mako reactor when they came across Emerald weapon. In the wake of their discovery, the mines were abandoned and sealed, and the town of Benora was built to cover up the site, housing Shinra staff that were kept under observation. Ultima weapon appears in Final Fantasy VIII using an identical design to 7, and wielding Cloud's Ultima weapon. It is a boss fought in the Deep Sea Research Center once the party acquires the airship. Little information is given on it, but it is said the station was a mobile facility for research on new methods of drawing magic. The center is found abandoned on a small island with a deep cavern excavated, so it seems they found the Ultima weapon sealed here and either were killed or fled the site. Ultima weapon can use Light Pillar to deal a fixed 9999 damage to a character, and can also use Meteor, Gravager, and Quake. The ultimate Guardian Force, Eden, can be drawn from it, and it is one of only 2 enemies that has the Ultima spell to draw, the other being Omega weapon. Omega weapon is found in Ultimecia's castle at the end of the game, encountered in the chapel after the secondary party rings a bell outside the gallery. 8 is Omega weapon's first appearance in real-world chronology. Omega weapon is terrifically powerful, and can use Light Pillar, Megiddo Flame, which deals a fixed 9,998 damage to the party, and Terror Break, which deals 16 hits of defense ignoring damage to all targets. It also has numerous other powerful attacks. In Final Fantasy X, Ultima weapon and Omega weapon are bosses in the Omega Ruins, an optional dungeon. A disgraced Yevon monk named Omega was banished here long ago, and over time his hatred turned him into Omega Weapon and spawned a lesser shade of him, Ultima Weapon. The party must defeat Ultima Weapon to reach the depths of the dungeon where Omega Weapon appears. The two fight similarly, though Omega Weapon has higher stats and stronger attacks, and it is the only enemy that can teach Kamari his ultimate Ronso rage, Nova. A palette swap of the two, Nemesis, can be fought in the monster arena as the final challenge, after capturing 10 of every type of fiend for the arena and defeating all other monster arena bosses. Nemesis is another super boss, with 10 million HP and powerful attacks. There is also a monster arena boss called the Ultima Buster, but it is a palette swap of Sinspawn Gi, not Ultima Weapon. The Ultima Weapon plays a major role in Final Fantasy XIV's main questline, and is based on its Final Fantasy VII design. It is a super weapon created by the lost Allagan Empire that had the power to absorb primals and assimilate their abilities. The 14th Imperial Legion, commanded by Gaius Van Belzar, excavated the Ultima Weapon after the 7th Umbral Calamity, intending to use it to conquer Eorzea. When the Ultima Weapon is restored to working order, Gaius uses it to absorb the primals Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda. He then issues an ultimatum to the leaders of the Eorzean Alliance to surrender to the Garlean Empire or be destroyed by the Ultima Weapon. The Alliance puts their hopes in the Warrior of Light and the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, and form a plan to cut off the supply lines to the Imperial stronghold where the Ultima Weapon is housed, and then infiltrate the fortress and destroy it. In the depths of the Praetorium, Gaius pilots the Ultima Weapon against the Warrior of Light, but they are able to overcome it and the primals are freed from it as it is weakened. Gaius is confounded by their power, and the Ascian Laha Brea reveals that the true power of the Ultima Weapon comes from its core, a mysterious artifact called the Heart of Sabbac, which contains the spell Ultima. With the Ultima Weapon's true power unbound, the Praetorium is destroyed and the Warrior of Light engages the Ultima Weapon again, and this time destroys it. While there is another battle afterwards against the Laha Brea, he is not very powerful and easily defeated, so the Ultima Weapon can be considered the final boss of the questline. In battle, the Ultima Weapon can use various Magitech-type lasers, energy blasts, and missiles, and can use the abilities of the captured Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda, though it loses these abilities as the primals are freed from it. In the second encounter, it can spawn Magitech bits to aid it in battle, and when low on health will begin to charge Ultima, a spell that will wipe out the party if cast, so players must rush to defeat Ultima Weapon before it finishes charging. Later patches allow the player to fight harder versions of the Ultima Weapon, framed as the wandering minstrel composing songs of the battle and embellishing its details. The minstrel's ballad, Ultima's Bane, pits the player against the Ultima Weapon, who can conjure Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda to attack the player. In The Weapon's Refrain, players must face the three primals, then Laha Brea, before facing the Ultima Weapon, who absorbs the three primals and empowers itself. As the fight continues, it once again conjures the primals to fight the player, though with much more complex mechanics than before. While the Ultima Weapon was destroyed, the Garleans did not forget the power it wielded. During the events of Shadowbringers, Esther 9 finds a prototype recreation of the Ultima Weapon, Arch Ultima. It is the first of a line of Garlean Magitech weaponry reverse-engineered from the Ultima Weapon and given the same ability to absorb primals. Their creation was overseen by the new leader of the 7th Imperial Legion, Valens Van Vero, who incorporated a system into them called Oversoul, which overrides the pilot's mind with data from a high-ranked Imperial officer to improve their combat performance. Over the course of the questline, the Warrior of Light engages Ruby Weapon, Sapphire Weapon, Emerald Weapon, and Diamond Weapon. Each of them fights in a manner reminiscent of their appearance in Final Fantasy VII, while also incorporating attacks themed around the Imperial officer whose mind is contained in their Oversoul system. After the Diamond Weapon is defeated, Gaius confronts Valens, and the enslaved pilot within Diamond Weapon, who is Gaius' adopted son Alphonse, grabs Valens and crushes him to death. With his death, the weapon project would seem to be over. However, the Endwalker expansion is yet to come, so this cannot be certain. In patch 4.2 of Stormblood, a hard mode dungeon, the Fractal Continuum, was added. The boss of the dungeon is the Ultima Beast, which is based on the Ultima Weapon's original design in Final Fantasy VI, and is implied to have been involved in prototypes of the Ultima Weapon. Its presence here is a nod to the fractal continuum being accessed from Aziz's Law, a floating continent where the Warring Triad is sealed. A prototype of the Ultima weapon, appropriately named Proto-Ultima, can be found flying around Aziz's Law as a fate event, and later appears as a boss in the Dun Skaith raid. In the universe of Final Fantasy XV, Diamond Weapon is a powerful Magitech weapon designed by Niflheim. A diamond weapon is deployed against the Kingsglaive, who are stationed in the sky, and effortlessly breaks their encampment, but Niflheim then retreats. This is merely a show of force to convince the Lucians to agree to a peace treaty, which is a ruse to infiltrate the crown city of Insomnia and seize the crystal powering the wall, a magical barrier protecting Insomnia. Several diamond weapons are deployed in the attack on Insomnia and battle the Old Wall, great statues of the kings of Lucis animated by their spirits. In the novel Dawn of the Future, based on scrapped plans for additional DLC episodes, Aranea Highwind finds the Niflheim capital Garlean being destroyed by a diamond weapon unleashed by Arden, and she disables its Magitech cores to destroy it. In Luna Freya's chapter, another Magitech weapon, Sapphire Weapon, is found in Solheim ruins when Luna Freya and her companions venture into them to find Aranea. In both cases, it seems that Diamond Weapon and Sapphire Weapon would have served as the final bosses of their DLC episodes had they been made. Weapon-type enemies have appeared in many other games, the most common being Ultima Weapon and Omega Weapon. Ultima Weapon has variably appeared using its Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy VII design, and more recently its 14 design. Sometimes their inclusion is just a reference to these earlier appearances, but on occasion they are given larger roles. Omega Weapon appears as an optional boss in Final Fantasy Dimensions, guarding various powerful weapons. It is an amalgamation of its 6 and 8 incarnations, with a design based on 6 and attacks based on 8, though it also has the Omega Drive attack it did in 6. In Dimensions 2, Ultima Weapon appears on the 40th floor of the Babel Tower, and when defeated is acquired as a summon. It teaches Amo Ultima and uses the Light Beam attack when summoned. In Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, a weapon is sought by the Emperor of Aldor to use it to destroy all life in the world, as he has been twisted to believe that a world where only he exists will be a perfect dominion. The weapon is not given a specific designation, it is simply weapon, but visually it is based on the Ultima Weapon from Final Fantasy XIV. The Final Fantasy VI version of Ultima Weapon also appears as a boss. Final Fantasy Record Keeper has many versions of weapon-type enemies encountered in numerous battles. The Final Fantasy VI Ultima Weapon and Omega Weapon are nightmare bosses guarding the Ultima and Omega Drive abilities. The 14 Ultima Weapon is a Torment boss, and the 7 Ultima Weapon is a Dreambreaker boss. When the game's multiplayer mode was to be shut down, the colored weapons from 7 were added as the last challenge for players to attempt before multiplayer was removed entirely. Ultima Weapon appears as a boss in World of Final Fantasy, using a design based on its 14 incarnation. The 6 Ultima Weapon appears as a boss in Dissidia Opera Omnia, and is unleashed on the party by Kefka. The 7 weapons appear in the Theatrhythm series as powerful bosses, and as card summons in Mobius Final Fantasy. Bahamut's Lagoon is a tactical RPG for the Super Famicom developed by Square that was never released outside of Japan. Some of its sprites are heavily modified from Final Fantasy sprites, and such a modified sprite of Ultima Weapon is the basis for 2 Dragon-type enemies, the Saint Weapon and the Black Buster, a reference to Ultima Weapon and Ultima Buster. Thank you to everyone for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more lore of Final Fantasy in the future, and stop by the community tab on my channel to vote on the next subject.